You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hold on, let me start that again. So I had to put my headphones on.
Oh, that's going to dig in the side of your head.
I know. Well, if I got the hat on.
Oh, thankfully.
Yeah. Once I take it off, it's going to be a problem.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
To stop was destruction. To retreat. Let me try that again.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
To stop was destruction. To retreat was disaster. To go forward was orders. We're talking about Perrin's Brigade for our May Get Out of the Car tour, May 21st at 10 a.m. July 1st, 1863 proved to be a deadly day for both armies at Gettysburg, and despite the apparent defeat inflicted on the Union Army, their ability to inflict their own brand of punishment on Confederate units would later prove crucial in subsequent days. Join us as we walk in the path of one of those units, the Brigade of Colonel Abner Perrin, as they attacked the last Union line northwest of Gettysburg that afternoon. I always thought that you should always say Abner Perrin's name as if you have some sort of a speech impediment or a West Virginia coal country accent, where you're like Abner Perrin, something like that.
He's a cartoon character.
yeah, Colonel Abner Perrin. But Lewis Trott,
get those Yankees.
Lewis Trott is with us again to talk about this tour. Lewis, what made you decide to tell us about Perrin's Brigade this year?
Because nobody really talks about them.
Yeah.
And like I've mentioned several times, I try to pick something from each of the 3 days, just try to make it even throughout the summer. And we talk about the retreat, the Union Army retreating back through the town. A lot of focus, rightly so, is on the other side of the line where Early's men come in, and together with Rhodes' men, they push back the 11th Corps. Mm-hmm. So, and then, the Iron Brigade and everybody else falls back on the other end of the line. But who's doing the pushing? If anything, concentration is put on Scales' Brigade because they get tore up.
Yeah.
I mean, they get devastated. I think it's a little over 50% casualty rate for that brigade. But they're not the only ones there. They have another brigade to their right, and that brigade to the right was ultimately going to prove the undoing of the Union line up on Seminary Ridge, because they do form, I think it's like 15 cannon in a line. Those troops falling back from McPherson's Woods area off of the area we know as Reynolds Avenue now. They're falling back towards Seminary Ridge. They try to form a line and support that cannon, but that's not going to be enough. And why? Perrin's Brigade. So it's just something you don't hear a lot of people talking about in an effort to do something a little bit different. Hopefully we can walk across that field.
Rarely get to do that.
No, yeah. And so just another aspect of the battle to talk about.
What, just kind of like briefly, what is the, what happens to Perrin's Brigade? I mean, do they just sweep across the field? And
they do, but more importantly, from a tactical perspective, they get on the Union left end. They envelop that line on Seminary Ridge. They envelop the left end of that line. They flank that line, and that proves the undoing.
Right.
They suffer, I think it's about 30% casualties, so not nearly as much as Scales' Brigade, but they're not getting tore up in open fields with the cannon like Scales' Brigade.
Right.
Is
so, but they're one of the brigades that we could say started the dominoes falling and the Union retreat through town by flanking them.
Yeah, and once they're outflanked, the Union line there is outflanked. There's only one way to go, and that's backwards.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, and they do the pushing, and then part of my description I come up with is you go to day 3. Who does Lee use for Pickett Pettigrew Trimble charge, especially the Pettigrew Trimble portion of that charge? He has units that he's putting in there. One of them is Archer's Brigade under Burkett Fry at this point. But these units got tore up on the first day, and they're being put in line on this third day, the last effort, where there were other units they could have used. And so, granted, the Lee could have used other units that weren't as used up as the units he uses, but the fact that those units are used up and they've suffered significant amount of casualties before we get to day 3, that is because of the Union stand that they make on that first day. They just don't turn and go. They dish out punishment before they go, and that punishment they dish out comes into play on the 3rd day, I think. And these units that aren't at full strength now have to make this impossible charge across an open field.
Yeah.
But it says something about that first day, about what the Union Army actually
was able to inflict on the Confederates. Yeah.
And I always wonder, there's a big argument, well, who fell back, 1st Corps or the 11th Corps, amongst the members of those two corps afterwards. In reality, they should be proud of themselves. They're going to fall back. They're outnumbered. It's the one part in the 3 days where they're outnumbered, so they're going to fall back. There's no doubt in my mind. But the amount of damage they inflict as they're falling back significantly helps their cause later on in this point on the 3rd day. The
whole idea of fighting out west and north of town is to delay, isn't it? I mean, nobody, from what I understand, none of the high command intended that the battle be fought out there. It's just to delay so that they can get the high ground south of town. Is that?
Yeah, they know it's back there, but if they can stop them, I'm sure they will.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, if they could stop them and then the army can build around them out there, they would do it because you want to hold the town. But I mean, in the moment at that time, Buford, when he sees all this stuff and he starts to, it's just to delay the Confederates, and then it builds on top of that. But I haven't seen anything that said specifically, like, we intended to hold here, and I haven't seen anything that says specifically we intended to hold just long enough until we had to fall back. But to me, it just seems like that's kind of what the strategy was to just hold as best you can until the army comes
I
up.
agree. And if you look at Howard's actions, he leaves one of his divisions on
Cemetery Hill.
Steinwehr's division on Cemetery Hill, because he knows that's the high ground, and you got to keep that if nothing else.
Right.
And so that's a very prudent decision by him. But I think they could have easily just, especially the 11th Corps, look at what they did the previous battle. Situation is a little bit different, but they got overrun pretty good.
Right.
The only thing that saved everything that day, I think, is nighttime comes along. They attack so late in the day.
Yep.
So they have, pride to fight for, if nothing else, and they are already being besmirched, the 11th Corps, that is, about their ethnicity and the Flying Dutchman and so forth. So I think it would have been easily, what's the word I'm looking for? It would have been easy for them to lose morale and just say, well, I'm done. But no, they do stand out there and fight in an impossible situation, the way everything lines up, in my opinion. But they make sure that they cause damage before they go.
Yeah.
And that plays into the 3rd day. Now, it plays into the 3rd day because of the units that Lee allows to be chosen for part of the charge. He could have chosen other units, but he doesn't. So I like to talk about that a little bit. And then, like I said, people don't talk about Abner Perrin.
Abner Perrin.
So I figured I'd give them some spotlight a little bit. And they're they push them off Seminary Ridge.
Well, and that's what we try to do with this, is we're trying to not only take you to places in the park that you might not have ever been to because you don't get out of your car, but we're also trying to expose you to stories and characters and moments in the battle that a general tour with a licensed guide might not have time for.
I never mention Perrin on any tour.
Who does?
Yeah, you're not supposed to mention that many names anyways.
Right.
I'd have to be way up in the list of names before I get to Perrin.
Wouldn't it be terrible if one day somebody contacts us and says, I'd like to take a tour with Lewis about Perrin's Brigade, and then when you actually meet the person, they're like, well, I'm a descendant of Abner Perrin.
Only if we talk like that the whole time.
So for Perrin's Brigade, that's May 21st, 10 a.m. We're going to park along Reynolds Avenue or at the West End Guide Station. We're going to start at the guide station. So if you can park there, there's 2 parking lots there, one small one not so small, but not particularly huge. But I've seen a lot of cars stuffed into that gravel lot. And then, of course, along the roads, there's spaces. Park where legal, always. Pay attention to signs. Look to see if there's any lines for parking spaces, things
Stay
like
off
that.
the grass.
Stay off the grass. Big one. Don't park half on the grass and half on the pavement. I think I covered everything there with that. And then we're going to start with a little stroll from the guide station over to where we'll actually go off into the field. But it'll be a nice little walk through McPherson's Woods.
Yeah, it's sort of like if people come out to this one that were on the railroad cut tour we did,
yeah,
and we had to walk.
Yes,
this will be an easier walk, but it's probably about the same length. So
yeah,
and it's May; it's not going to be too hot. We'll be fine.
It won't be terrible.
It was hot at the railroad cut.
Oh, that was and it was a foggy morning. Remember?
Yeah.
Very foggy. It was really cool, and the fog, even though it made it humid, it kind of protected you from the sun. But once that fog burned off,
sweating like stuck bait.
Oh boy, that was tough. But it turned out to be a gorgeous day, though.
It was.
All right, well that's it. So don't forget, May 21st, 10 a.m. tour starts. Get there a little early. Park along Reynolds Avenue or at the West End Guide Station. Tour begins at the station. Abner Perrin's Brigade. We will
get that wascally wabbit.
we will expose you to something new, and that will be fun. So we will see you then, and thank you for listening.